He spent 3 years enduring her cruelty, but when her world collapsed in one desperate night, he was the only one who answered. What followed wasn't revenge, but redemption. The kind that sneaks in quietly and leaves you questioning everything about forgiveness. If you believe in second chances like this, subscribe for more. And tell us in the comments what you'd have done in his place and where you're watching from today. Elijah Brooks had seen plenty of bad nights in his life, but this one started strange even by his standards. The rain had been falling since dusk, steady and cold, coating the cracked windows of his small 2-bedroom apartment in a slick, trembling shine. Inside, the warmth from a cheap lamp spread across old wallpaper and the laughter of his 8-year-old daughter, Maya. She sat cross-legged on the floor, crayons scattered everywhere, coloring a picture of a castle with a purple sky. Elijah watched her from the couch, exhaustion lining his face, a faint scar visible above his brow, a remnant of his army days. He was proud of how far they'd come since his wife left 2 years ago, leaving only a short note and a hollow promise. Nights like this quiet, normal safe meant everything to him. Then his phone rang. He ignored it. The name flashing across the screen was one that always made his jaw tighten: Marina Hale. His boss. The cold, immaculate woman who ran their marketing agency like a battlefield. He had learned quickly that working under Marina meant being invisible when convenient and disposable when not. He muted the call, looked back at Maya, and smiled. But the phone lit up again. And again. 5 calls in 20 minutes. He muttered under his breath, "What could she possibly want now?" He picked it up, ready to block the number, but then a message appeared, just 3 words that didn't sound like her at all. "Please help. I'm in trouble." Elijah stared at the screen. The word "please" looked out of place coming from her. She had barked orders, cut salaries, and never once admitted needing anyone. For a moment he thought it was a prank. But something instinct maybe stirred in him. A gut feeling honed by years of watching people fall apart right before they asked for help. He looked toward Maya. She was humming quietly, her little voice filling the room with innocence that felt like armor. "Who's calling, Daddy?" she asked without looking up. "Just work, baby," he said softly, forcing a calm tone. But his pulse had quickened. He tried to reason with himself she'd fired 2 people that week. Without blinking, she could handle her own mess. Yet something in that message felt different. Not power, not pride, just fear. He rubbed his temple, grabbed his coat, and dialed the neighbor. "Mrs. Ramirez, I'm sorry for calling so late. Can you watch Maya for a bit? I need to help someone." The old woman's voice came through like comfort, wrapped in understanding. "Of course, mijo. Go." Within minutes, Maya was bundled in a blanket, clutching her stuffed bear as Elijah kissed her forehead. "I'll be back before you wake up," he promised. He wasn't sure he believed it. He just knew he couldn't ignore that text. The drive through the city was slow and silent, except for the wipers fighting the rain. Street lights smeared yellow across the windshield as Elijah followed the location Marina had sent Velvet Tide Lounge, a bar in the Upper District where executives closed million-dollar deals while pretending to like each other. He'd never been inside. It wasn't a place for people like him. Yet there he was, parking between polished SUVs and luxury sedans, still wearing his thrift store jacket and boots. Through the window he saw her instantly, Marina Hale, queen of composure, reduced to chaos. Her hair was undone, her blouse stained with red wine, and her voice, sharp even in slurred tones, echoed across the near-empty room. "I said I'm fine to drive," she shouted at the bartender who stood firm, holding her keys. "Do you know who I am?" she barked. The bartender didn't flinch. "Yeah," he said flatly. "Someone who's not getting these keys back." Elijah exhaled, pushed open the door, and stepped into the smell of liquor and regret. Marina's eyes flicked toward him, unfocused but relieved. "Elijah," she said, her voice trembling. "Tell this man who I am." The bartender gave him a look, part pity, part warning. "You her friend?" "Something like that," Elijah replied. "I'll take her home." He helped her to her feet, steadying her as she stumbled, mumbling incoherently about deadlines and betrayal. He didn't know what had happened, but it didn't matter. As they walked out, he caught movement from across the street. Someone sitting in a sleek, black car, a phone raised, recording. He didn't realize it was Victor Caro, CEO of their biggest client, the same man who'd threatened to end his company's contract earlier that week after a heated argument with Marina. Now Caro had footage that could end her career for good. But Elijah didn't notice. He just guided her into his car, his focus on getting her home safe. Inside, the rain drummed softly on the roof. Marina's voice was quieter now, almost fragile. "Why are you helping me?" she murmured. Elijah kept his eyes on the road. "Because it's the right thing to do." She laughed bitterly, her head leaning against the glass. "Even after how I treated you?" He glanced at her reflection in the window, a woman who had spent years building walls out of arrogance, now cracking under her own weight. "Everyone deserves a second chance," he said simply. She stared at him for a moment, as if those words were in a language she hadn't heard since childhood. Then she closed her eyes and whispered, "I don't." By the time they reached her apartment complex, a towering glass structure overlooking the city, Marina was nearly asleep. Elijah Parked helped her inside and ignored the curious look from the doorman. He laid her on the couch, left a glass of water nearby, and took one last look around. The place was spotless, expensive, and utterly lifeless. No photos, no warmth. He felt a pang of pity for the woman who had everything except peace. As he turned to leave, Marina stirred, mumbling his name, her voice softer than he'd ever heard. "Elijah. Thank you." He paused in the doorway, unsure what to say. He didn't believe gratitude from her meant anything. Still, something inside him whispered that this night wasn't just a favor. It was the beginning of something neither of them could undo. The next few moments inside the Velvet Tide burned into Elijah's mind like a photograph he couldn't forget. The soft glow of amber lights reflected off glass and spilled liquor as he approached the counter where Marina Hale, the woman who made executives tremble, was unraveling piece by piece. Her hair, usually sculpted into corporate precision, clung to her damp temples. The sharpness that defined her was gone, replaced by a flush of defeat and defiance. "I said I'm fine to drive." She snapped, her voice quivering with false strength. "I could buy this entire place and everyone in it." The bartender folded his arms and shook his head. "Ma'am, I've already called a cab. You're not driving anywhere tonight." Elijah stood a few feet away, watching the scene before stepping forward, knowing the situation could spiral. "I'll take her," he said. Marina turned her head slowly, her glazed eyes blinking at him, as if seeing something she couldn't process. "Elijah Brooks." She said her words heavy with disbelief and relief tangled together. "You came. You texted me," he replied simply. "Come on, let's get you home." He slipped her arm over his shoulder and felt the weight of her body sink into him, a strange vulnerability from someone who had spent years towering above him in authority. The bartender handed over her purse reluctantly. "Good luck, man," he muttered. "She's been trying to fire the cab driver for 10 minutes. Elijah gave him a faint smirk and nodded, leading her outside where the rain had slowed to a whisper. The air smelled of wet asphalt and fading perfume. Across the street, a car engine idled quietly, its tinted window rolling down just enough for a phone to capture the moment. Inside sat Victor Caro, the company's biggest client, watching with cold interest. His jaw tightened as he hit record. Earlier that day, Marina had embarrassed him in a meeting, cutting down his ideas in front of her team. Now he had evidence of her recklessness, a video that could ruin her if used right. Elijah, unaware of the camera's red light, focused on keeping her steady as they reached his old sedan. She mumbled half-coherent phrases about her mother deadlines and how people always leave when they see the truth. He fastened her seatbelt, noticing the tremor in her hands. "You don't have to talk," he said quietly, starting the car. She looked at him, her eyes distant, unfocused, and whispered, "You're the only one who came." For a second, he didn't know how to respond. There were layers in those words, years of pride cracking open to expose something human beneath the glass. The drive through the city was a slow crawl of silence, broken only by the sound of the wipers slicing through drizzle. The glow from the streetlight slid across her face like moving shadows. Elijah's mind kept circling back to the same thought. Why him? Why, out of all the people she could call, did she choose the one she'd spent 3 years belittling? He gripped the steering wheel tighter, glancing at her slumped form beside him. Her makeup was smeared, her breathing uneven, but her expression somewhere between exhaustion and surrender was haunting. Halfway home, Marina stirred, opening her eyes just enough to look at him. "You think I'm pathetic, don't you?" she slurred. "After everything I've done to you." Elijah hesitated, then said, "No, I think you're human." She laughed bitterly, turning her face towards the window. "You'd be the first." He didn't answer. There was nothing more to say. The rest of the drive passed in silence until they reached her building, an expensive glass tower that seemed to mock the world below. Elijah parked near the entrance, stepping out to help her. The doorman raised an eyebrow but said nothing as Elijah half-carried her through the marble lobby. He caught their reflection in the polished floor, her designer shoes dragging his work boots, leaving small, wet marks beside them. It was a strange sight. The ruthless CEO and her exhausted employee crossing paths not as boss and subordinate, but as two broken people on opposite ends of the same loneliness. Inside the elevator, the faint hum filled the silence. Marina leaned against the mirrored wall, eyes closed. "Why'd you help me?" she muttered again. "You should have let me fall." Elijah looked straight ahead, watching the floor numbers climb. "Because my daughter's asleep waiting for her dad to come home," he said quietly. "And I want to be the kind of man she believes I am." Marina's eyes flickered open, studying him as if she'd never really looked at him before. Something unreadable passed between them, gone before the elevator chimed. When they reached her apartment, she fumbled through her purse and handed him a sleek, black keycard. Inside, the place was sterile white walls, silver fixtures, no trace of a life being lived. He helped her to the couch, noticing a single framed photograph on a nearby shelf, Marina younger, smiling beside an older woman. "Your mom?" he asked without thinking. She nodded, her face softening for the first time. "She died 5 years ago today." Elijah froze. That explained everything: the drinking, the call, the pain under the surface. "I'm sorry," he said simply. She took a shaky breath, then whispered, "Don't be. I stopped being someone worth missing a long time ago." Her eyes glistened, but she turned away before a tear could fall. Elijah fetched her some water, setting it gently beside her. "Drink that," he said. She obeyed like a child, staring blankly ahead. He noticed her phone buzzing again, another call from Richard Townsend, the CEO of the same client who was now watching from across town. "Don't answer," Elijah warned. But Marina, ever the professional even in ruin, swiped to accept. "Richard, what a pleasant surprise," she began, her tone tightening. Within seconds, her face fell. "Richard, please, I can explain." Elijah heard the furious voice on the other end and stepped forward. Without thinking, he took the phone from her trembling hand. "Mr. Townsend, this is Elijah Brooks," he said calmly. "Miss Hale just received some personal news tonight. I'm helping her get home safely. I understand you're concerned, but perhaps we can revisit this Monday." There was a long pause. Then Townsend's tone softened. "You work for her?" "Yes, sir," Elijah said. "And she's one of the best leaders I've known, just human tonight." The call ended quietly, crisis diffused. When he handed back the phone, Marina stared at him as if he'd just rewritten the ending of her worst night. "You saved my career," she whispered. "You didn't deserve to lose it," he replied. She exhaled shakily, tears threatening again. "After all I've done to you." He shrugged, heading toward the door. Everyone deserves a second chance, remember. He tapped the keycard she'd given him, and the door unlocked with a soft mechanical beep. The apartment opened up into an expanse of glass and white, a skyline view stretching endlessly beyond the windows. Everything looked perfect, polished, expensive, but cold. No clutter, no warmth, no trace of life. Elijah had seen hotel rooms with more personality. He guided Marina inside, sitting her gently on the couch. She blinked up at him, her mascara smudged beneath tired eyes. "You can go," she mumbled, voice cracking with exhaustion. "I'll be fine." Elijah almost laughed at the irony. Nothing about her looked fine. "I'll just make sure you have water," he said, heading towards the kitchen. Even her refrigerator looked like a showroom piece, stocked with neatly arranged bottled water champagne and takeout containers labeled with dates. He poured a glass, then noticed something on the side of the fridge, a single photograph held by a magnet. It stood out like color on a grayscale canvas. In it, a much younger Marina, maybe early 20s, smiled broadly, beside an older woman with the same gray-green eyes and refined posture. The two of them were sitting at a small cafe table, sunlight spilling across their faces. The joy there was unmistakable. Pure, unguarded, the kind of happiness money couldn't fake. "That's my mother," came Marina's voice from behind him, startling him slightly. She had gotten up, leaning weakly against the wall, still barefoot, her silk blouse wrinkled and stained. "She died 5 years ago. Today." Elijah turned, meeting her eyes. For a moment, the bitterness he'd built toward her evaporated. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "Losing a parent never stops hurting." She gave a hollow laugh, walking toward the window. "You sound like you know." "I do," he replied. "My dad passed when I was a kid. It changes you." She stared at the city lights for a long time, before whispering. "She used to say the world was kinder when I smiled." I stopped believing that. Her reflection in this glass looked smaller than he'd ever imagined. "Maybe it's still true," Elijah said quietly. She didn't respond, just stood there breathing unevenly. Then her phone buzzed on the table. She turned and froze when she saw the caller ID, Victor Caro. Elijah's stomach tightened. That name had been floating around the office all week, the man who controlled millions in contracts, the one Marina had angered during their last meeting. "Don't answer," he warned. But Marina's pride flared even through the alcohol. "I have to." She snatched the phone, composing her face like she was about to step onto a stage. "Victor," she began, voice suddenly crisp, professional, detached. But seconds later her expression cracked. "No, that's not. Please listen." Elijah could faintly hear the man shouting on the other end, furious words like unprofessional reputation and termination. Marina's fingers trembled. "It's not what it looks like," she pleaded, voice breaking. Without thinking, Elijah reached forward and took the phone gently from her hand. "Mr. Caro," he said evenly. The shouting paused. "Who is this?" the man demanded. "Elijah Brooks, sir, Miss Hale's associate. Why are you answering her phone? Because she's had an unexpected personal loss today, and I wanted to make sure she got home safely. I understand your concerns, but I promise you there's no scandal, no unprofessional behavior, just a difficult night." Elijah's tone was calm, but firm, his voice steady as if he'd rehearsed diplomacy all his life. There was silence, then Caro sighed. "She's lucky to have someone like you around, Brooks. I'll call her Monday." The call ended. Elijah exhaled, handing the phone back. Marina just stared at him, her mouth slightly opened, eyes wide with disbelief. You saved my account," she whispered. "You saved my career." He shrugged lightly, trying to deflect the weight of her gratitude. "You'd have done the same for anyone in my position, right?" She blinked slowly, realizing the answer was no. She wouldn't have. Not then. Maybe not ever. He started gathering his things, wanting to leave before the vulnerability in the room swallowed them both. "Get some rest," he said. "Drink water. You'll feel human again in the morning." But as he reached the door, she spoke again, her voice soft, unsure, almost trembling. "Why are you being kind to me?" Elijah turned halfway. "Because kindness doesn't cost me anything," he said, "and because people forget they need it until someone reminds them." She looked at him for a long time, eyes glistening. "I've been terrible to you," she admitted. "You could have let me destroy myself tonight, and you didn't." He hesitated before answering. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Marina. Even you." He walked out, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The elevator ride down felt endless, the hum of machinery blending with the echo of his own thoughts. He'd done the right thing, that much he knew, but something inside him felt unsettled. He'd seen power stripped away from arrogance before, but not like this. Not from her. When he reached the street, the rain had stopped completely, the city washed clean under the early light of dawn. He didn't notice the black car still parked across the street, the faint glow of a phone screen inside. Victor Caro had kept recording long after the call ended, capturing the moment Elijah left the building. A small smile crept across his face. The video wasn't as damning as he hoped, but it was enough leverage to make her dance when the time came. Meanwhile, up in the penthouse, Marina sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the skyline. Her glass of water sat untouched. The guilt she'd carried for years began to stir the loss of her mother, the coldness she'd built as armor, the cruelty she'd justified as leadership. She whispered Elijah's words under her breath, testing their weight. Everyone deserves a second chance. She didn't believe it, not yet. But for the first time, she wanted to. Her phone buzzed again, a text from him this time. "You'll be okay. Just rest." She didn't reply, but her chest ached in a way she hadn't felt in years. The thought of someone caring not for what she represented, but for who she was underneath, shook her more than the whiskey ever could. She walked back to the refrigerator, looked at the picture of her mother, and pressed her fingers to the glass. "Maybe it's not too late," she whispered. Outside, the city hummed with the beginning of another day. The apartment was still save for the soft ticking of a designer clock on the wall and the occasional hum of the city outside. Elijah had already left his scent of rain and worn leather faint in the air. Marina sat on the couch, her body heavy, but her mind restless, her thoughts looping through the chaos of the night. The glass of water on the table remained untouched, condensation pooling at its base, like a clock melting away time. She leaned back, closing her eyes, trying to will sleep to come, but it wouldn't. Every time she shut her eyes, she saw his face, not the submissive employee she'd barked at for years, but the quiet steadiness of someone who had no reason to care, yet did. She thought of his calm voice diffusing Victor Caro's wrath, of how he didn't gloat or condemn, just acted as though helping her was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't understand it. People like Elijah weren't supposed to exist in her world. Her world ran on power leverage and fear, the tools she'd mastered to keep her own brokenness buried. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under, but her sleep was shallow and scattered with flashes of memory. She dreamed of her mother, the same cafe from the photograph, the same sunlight spilling across their faces, but in the dream, the chair across from her was empty and Marina kept reaching across the table, calling her name. When she woke with a start, her cheeks were wet, and the city outside her window had already turned pale with dawn. For a long time, she sat motionless, staring at her reflection in the glass. The woman looking back at her didn't resemble the one in the photo. Her eyes were tired, her hair messy, her soul heavy. She whispered to herself, "Everyone deserves a second chance." The words echoed softly, strange and unfamiliar on her tongue. Across town, Elijah was making pancakes. The smell of butter filled his small kitchen as Maya danced around with her teddy bear, her laughter a melody he never tired of hearing. For a few minutes, the chaos of last night didn't exist. He pretended life was simple, just breakfast, school, and another day at work. But the moment he looked at his phone and saw no new messages from Marina, the memory returned like a shadow. He wasn't sure what she'd remember, if anything. Drunk apologies had a way of evaporating with daylight. Still, he found himself thinking about her, wondering what it took for someone to build walls that high, and how it must feel to finally see them crack. Back in the penthouse, Marina sat at her desk, hands trembling slightly as she opened her laptop. She didn't know what compelled her guilt-fear curiosity, but she typed Elijah's name into the company's employee database. His file opened, and for the first time, she read it with more than managerial detachment. His record was spotless. High performance ratings, 0 complaints, multiple commendations from clients. Then she noticed a note she'd written months ago. Too distracted by family obligations, not management material. The words hit her like a slap. She scrolled further, reading old performance reviews she'd barely glanced at before. He'd taken extra hours when others quit covered projects no one wanted, and even led a campaign that had saved one of their smaller accounts. She remembered rejecting his request for flexible hours after his daughter's school event, citing work priorities. Now seeing it in writing, she felt sick. How many moments had she taken from him in the name of professionalism? A dull ache spread behind her eyes. She shut the laptop and pressed her palms to her face, whispering, "What have I become?" The memory of Elijah's steady voice, "Everyone deserves a second chance," rose again, clearer this time, like light through a crack in the dark. She didn't deserve one, but maybe, just maybe, she could give one. By the time the sun climbed higher, Marina had changed into sweats and an oversized sweater, her usual armor traded for something softer. She brewed coffee but couldn't bring herself to drink it. Her phone buzzed with new emails, meetings, deadlines, all the noise she usually drowned in, but she ignored them. Instead, she opened her contacts and stared at Elijah's number. Her thumb hovered over the screen for nearly a full minute before she typed a short message. "Thank you for last night. I remember everything." Then she deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. Finally, she put the phone face down on the table, shaking her head. Apologies were easy. Change was not. That night, long after the city's hum dimmed, she walked barefoot to the kitchen and stared at the photo on the fridge again. Her mother's eyes seemed to follow her, kind, yet reproachful. "I know," she whispered, "I lost my way." The silence that followed was almost comforting, as if the walls themselves were listening. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel everything. She'd buried the grief, the loneliness, the guilt of pushing people away. The image of Elijah's tired but honest face drifted through her mind again, and she wondered what it would be like to live without pretending to stop being the dragon lady everyone feared. Miles away, Elijah sat on his couch, unable to sleep. He kept replaying the events in his mind, the bar, the drive, the phone call. It should have been just another bad night, something to forget. But it wasn't. Something about her cracked exterior had unsettled him. He had seen people break before, but not like that. It wasn't weakness he saw in her. It was exhaustion, the kind that came from carrying too much for too long. He thought of calling her to check in, but the last thing he needed was to give her another reason to see him as overstepping. Instead, he closed his eyes and whispered a short prayer, one of those quiet ones he saved for moments he couldn't control. "Lord, help her find peace," he murmured. Then he fell asleep on the couch, the faint glow of the streetlights washing over him like forgiveness. Monday came with its usual noise, the sound of printers whirring, phones ringing, and people pretending they loved their jobs more than they actually did. Elijah arrived 10 minutes late, balancing his messenger bag in one hand and a cup of gas station coffee in the other. The sleepless nights were starting to show dark circles under his eyes, a quiet stiffness in his shoulders. He had promised himself he wouldn't think about Marina Hale anymore. What happened Friday night was just a strange detour in the long, exhausting road of working under her. He had done what any decent person would do, and now it was time to move on. He adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and walked into the office. The moment he stepped through the glass doors, silence rippled across the floor. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. It took Elijah a second to understand why. Standing by his desk holding 2 paper cups was Marina Hale. The same Marina who once refused to learn anyone's first name unless she was firing them. The same Marina who once publicly humiliated him for being late to a client's vision. She was there waiting for him, looking uncomfortable, in a way he had never seen before. "Good morning, Elijah," she said softly, and every eye in the office widened in disbelief. "I got you coffee. Black with 1 sugar, right?" Elijah froze. He hadn't told her how he took his coffee. He had only ever mentioned it once, months ago, to an intern during a meeting she'd been in. Yes, ma'am," he said, taking the cup slowly like it might explode. Her hands trembled slightly. "Could we talk? In my office?" The words sounded less like a demand and more like a request. He nodded, confused, and followed her through the maze of cubicles. Whispers spread behind them like wildfire. When the door closed, she exhaled, as if she'd been holding her breath all morning. Marina's office was bathed in light, neat and precise as always, but something about it felt different today. She wasn't wearing her usual armor of heels and crisp blazers. Instead, she wore soft gray slacks, and a light blue blouse, her hair loosely tied back. Her face was still composed, but there was something human in her eyes. "You look tired," she said, gesturing toward the chair opposite her desk. "It's been a long weekend," he replied carefully. She nodded. "I imagine it has." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The air between them carried the weight of everything unspoken the night at the bar, the drive, the apology she barely remembered whispering. "I remember everything," she finally said. "All of it." Elijah straightened in his chair. "You don't have to explain. You were—" "No," she interrupted, voice firmer now. "You need to hear this." She came around the desk and sat across from him, hands clasped together. "You helped me when you had every reason not to. You protected my career, my reputation when most people would have watched me burn. I don't deserve that kind of grace." He looked at her, unsure whether to believe what he was hearing. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly. "I didn't do it for that." "I know," she whispered. "That's why it matters." She stood, walked back to her desk, and picked up a thin folder. "I spent the weekend reviewing your record. I realized something. I've been punishing you for being the kind of person I wish I was." She handed him the folder. Inside was paperwork for a promotion to senior creative director, a title 2 levels above his current role. His eyes widened. "I don't understand," he said. "Why me?" "Because you've earned it," she said simply. "And because I owe you more than an apology. This position comes with a 40% salary increase and full control over your schedule. No more working weekends unless you want to. No more missed school events." Elijah stared at her. "You're serious completely." She leaned against her desk, folding her arms. "You've been running this department in everything but title. I just didn't want to see it. I was too busy taking my pain out on everyone else." Her voice softened. "You told me everyone deserves a second chance. I'd like to believe that includes me." For a moment, the office titan disappeared, and all that was left was a woman trying to make peace with her past. Elijah felt something in his chest loosen, but he didn't trust it yet. "I appreciate this," he said slowly, "but you don't have to do it because you feel guilty." "It's not guilt," she said. "It's clarity. You were right about second chances. I just needed someone to show me what they looked like." The intercom buzzed suddenly, and Marina silenced it with a quick press of a button. "They'll live without me for 10 minutes, she said. "There's something else." She opened a drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is your bonus from the Townsend account, the one you saved. Technically, I was supposed to take credit for the negotiation, but that's not who I want to be anymore." Elijah blinked, speechless. "You don't have to." "I want to," she interrupted. "You earned it. You saved the deal. And you saved me from myself." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "That's a lot for one man to do in a night." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You know, you're kind of scaring me right now." "Good," she said, smiling for real this time. "Maybe it means I'm changing?" The sound of laughter from outside drifted faintly through the walls, but in this room, everything else felt still. Marina's eyes softened. "You mentioned your daughter's recital, right?" "The one I refused to let you attend?" He nodded cautiously. "When is it next Friday?" he said. "At 6. She nodded again. "Then don't come in that day. You'll have it off. Paid." He stared at her, unsure how to respond. "You're full of surprises today." "I've had a long weekend," she said dryly, and they both laughed. The tension between them eased, replaced by something lighter, almost fragile. When the meeting ended, Elijah stepped out into the main office, holding the folder, and everyone's heads turned again. Whispers followed him back to his desk. Marina didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt free. She stood by her window, staring down at the streets below, watching people move like tiny threads in a vast pattern. She thought of her mother's voice again, the one that always told her to be kind. Maybe kindness didn't make you weak. Maybe it made you brave. Every few minutes, his gaze drifted to Marina's office door, still closed, the faint shadow of her movement flickering through the frosted glass. All day she had been different, not the intimidating figure he'd come to fear, but someone quieter, thoughtful, softer. Even the staff had sensed it. No one dared to gossip aloud, but the whisper of her smile that morning had spread faster than any memo. He had spent the entire afternoon waiting for the other shoe to drop, convinced her kindness was temporary, that by tomorrow she'd snap back into the iron-willed woman who ruled the office like a queen. But now, as the light faded and the sound of the city drifted through the windows, something in him told him she meant it. The intercom clicked. Elijah Marina's voice came through, steady but hesitant. "Could you step in for a moment?" He sighed quietly, straightened his tie, and entered. She was standing by the window, her back to him, looking out over the skyline. The sunset painted streaks of orange across her reflection in the glass. "You wanted to see me?" he asked. "Yes," she said, turning. Her expression was unreadable. "Close the door." He obeyed. "Sit, please." He did. For a moment, she simply looked at him, her fingers tracing the edge of her desk as if she were trying to find the courage to say something she hadn't said aloud in years. Finally, she spoke. "Do you know what Friday was?" He frowned slightly. "The day of the presentation, or no," she said softly. "The anniversary of my mother's death." Her words hung in the air. Elijah's chest tightened as he remembered the photograph on her refrigerator. The joy in that image now ghost-like in his memory. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I wouldn't expect you to," she murmured, sitting across from him. "I never talk about her. Not here, not anywhere. After she passed, I thought if I buried myself in work, I could bury the grief with it. But it doesn't work that way. You don't bury grief. You just pass it to whoever stands closest." Her voice cracked slightly. "And for 3 years, that's been you." Elijah didn't speak. He just listened. Marina drew a shaky breath. "I hated seeing you leave early for your daughter's recitals. Hated hearing you talk about her in the break room. Not because I disliked her, but because it reminded me of everything I lost. Every time you smiled when she called, I felt something sharp twist inside me. I punished you for having what I couldn't get back." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "That's not an excuse," she said firmly. "But it's the truth." He looked at her, his voice calm, but full of something like understanding. "Grief doesn't make us monsters," he said. "It just makes us human in the wrong ways." She smiled faintly through tears. "You make it sound easier than it is." "It's not," he said. "It's just the start." They sat in silence for a long moment, the kind that didn't demand to be filled. The sound of the city pulsed softly outside. Marina finally reached into her desk and pulled out an old locket. "This was hers," she said, placing it on the table. "I've worn it every day since she died, even when it hurt to feel it against my skin. Some days I'd look at it and hate her for leaving me, even though I knew it wasn't her fault." She looked up at him. "Do you ever hate the people you lose?" Elijah thought of his father, of long nights waiting for him to come home from construction jobs that ended too early, of the phone call that never came. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I think we just hate the hole they leave behind." Marina exhaled slowly, nodding. "That sounds about right." She traced her finger over the locket again. "I told myself if I worked hard enough, if I controlled everything, I could stop losing things. But control isn't safety. It's just fear wearing a power suit." Her laugh was small, but real, a sound that felt foreign even to her. Elijah found himself smiling too, though his chest ached for her. "You don't have to keep holding it alone," he said. "You've got people who'd help if you let them." "Like you?" she asked quietly. "Like anyone," he replied, though he knew he meant himself. Before either of them could say more, Elijah's phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen. Maya's school. His heart dropped. He answered quickly. "This is Elijah." The voice on the other end was calm but concerned. "Mr. Brooks, Maya's been running a fever. We think it's best you come pick her up." Elijah nodded automatically. "I'll be there right away." When he hung up, guilt washed over him. He turned to Marina. "I'm sorry, I need to go. My daughter's sick." He braced for the look he knew too well. The frown, the disapproval, the reminder that family couldn't come before work. Instead, she stood up immediately, her expression soft and full of concern. "Of course," she said. "Go. She needs you." He hesitated, unsure he'd heard her right. "Really, yes, Elijah," she said, her tone firm but warm. "You've done enough for one day. Go take care of her." He gathered his things, still half in disbelief. At the door, he turned back. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for understanding." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I finally do." After he left, Marina sank into her chair, her heart oddly full and aching all at once. She looked down at the empty space where the locket had rested and realized she'd finally done something her mother would have been proud of. She'd chosen compassion over control. For years, she'd confused power with purpose. But seeing Elijah, his patience, his integrity, the way he carried his love for Maya like a badge of honor reminded her that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it just said, "Go home, your daughter needs you." Elijah's drive to the school was quiet, except for the hum of traffic. His mind replayed her voice, her vulnerability, her apology. It wasn't forgiveness she asked for. It was understanding. That more than anything humbled him. When he reached the school, Maya was sitting in the nurse's office, pale but smiling weakly. "Daddy," she said, reaching out. He scooped her into his arms, the weight of her small body grounding him. "Let's get you home, sweetheart." It was Sunday evening when the knock came, 3 gentle taps that didn't sound like a neighbor's or a delivery driver's. He hesitated, wiping his hands on a towel, then opened the door. Standing there in the dim hallway light was Marina Hale, holding a paper bag in one hand and a small stack of books in the other. Her expression was uncertain, her posture slightly stiff, as if she wasn't sure she belonged there. She wore jeans and a simple cream sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, no trace of the cold executive he'd once known. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said. "I just wanted to check on Maya, and on you." Elijah blinked, too surprised to speak for a second. "You came here," he finally said. "To my building." She gave a nervous laugh. "Google Maps is very efficient." He stepped aside, still processing the sight of his boss standing in his narrow doorway, looking more human than he'd ever thought possible. "Come in," he said. The apartment was small but warm, filled with the soft clutter of a life, well-lived, framed photos of Maya at the park, her school drawings pinned to the fridge, a half-finished Lego tower on the coffee table. Marina took it all in quietly as she stepped inside. "It's nice," she said honestly. "It feels alive." Elijah shrugged. "It's chaotic." "That too." She smiled faintly. She set the bag on the counter and took out a container. "Chicken soup," she said. "My mother's recipe." The words came out softer than she intended, a bridge between worlds that didn't quite exist anymore. "And these," she held up, "the books are for Maya. I didn't know what she liked, so I brought a few classics. Charlotte's Web, The Secret Garden, and—" She stopped as a small voice interrupted from the hallway. "Daddy, who's that?" Maya stood there wrapped in her blanket, her curls a wild halo around her sleepy face. When she saw Marina, her eyes widened. "Is that your boss?" she asked. And before Elijah could answer, she added with the blunt honesty only children have, "Daddy says you're the dragon lady." Elijah froze, feeling the blood drain from his face. "Maya," he started quickly. "That's not—" But before he could finish, Marina laughed. Not the sharp, rehearsed laugh she used in meetings, but a real, startled, beautiful laugh that filled the tiny apartment with warmth. She bent down to Maya's level. "Yes," she said, still smiling. "I suppose I am the dragon lady, but I'm trying very hard not to breathe fire anymore." Maya tilted her head, studying her seriously. "That's good," she said. "Fire's dangerous." "It is," Marina agreed. "So I've decided to trade it for hot chocolate instead. Much safer." The little girl giggled, and Elijah let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Soon, Marina was sitting on the couch beside Maya, listening as the girl animatedly recounted her favorite parts of the story her dad was writing. "He's making a book," Maya said proudly. "It's about a dad and his daughter who build a castle out of stars." "That sounds magical," Marina said, her eyes softening. "He's a good storyteller." "He's the best," Maya said without hesitation. Elijah leaned against the doorway, arms folded, watching them. The sight was surreal, his strict, untouchable boss chatting casually with his daughter, laughing, her guard gone. He noticed small things he'd never seen before. The way her smile reached her eyes, the slight tremor in her voice when she talked about her mother, the careful gentleness in how she spoke to Maya. After dinner, which consisted of reheated soup and shared laughter, Maya fell asleep on the couch, her head resting on Marina's lap. The woman who once barked orders at high-powered boardrooms now sat quietly brushing a strand of hair from a child's face with a tenderness that made Elijah's throat tighten. "She's incredible," Marina whispered. "You're doing a wonderful job with her." Elijah smiled faintly. "Trying my best. Some days I think she's raising me more than the other way around." Marina chuckled. "I know the feeling. My mother used to say children teach us how to love without expecting anything in return." Her voice softened again. "I forgot how to do that for a long time." When Maya stirred, Elijah carefully lifted her and carried her to her bedroom. When he returned, Marina was standing by the window, looking out at the quiet city. The reflection of the streetlights shimmered on her face. "You didn't have to come," he said, "but I'm glad you did." She turned toward him. "You were kind to me when I didn't deserve it," she said. "The least I could do was show the same to your daughter." He smiled, leaning on the counter. "You're different than I expected you to be." "So are you," she replied. "I thought kindness was weakness. You've proven it's the opposite." She looked down at her hands. "I owe you more than I can ever repay, Elijah. Not just for what you did, but for what you showed me." "And what's that?" he asked. "That people can still surprise you," she said. They stood there for a moment, silence stretching between them, not awkward, but full of understanding. Outside, the rain began again, light and steady, tapping softly on the window. Marina glanced toward Maya's room and smiled. "Tell her I'll visit again soon if that's okay." "She'd like that," Elijah said. "Me too, honestly." Her eyes met his, and for a brief, quiet second, neither looked away. Something gentle but undeniable passed between them. Recognition, maybe? Or the beginning of something neither dared to name. She broke the moment first, picking up her coat. "I should go before I overstay my welcome." "You haven't," he said, "but I understand." She paused at the door. "Elijah, yeah. Thank you," she said softly, "for letting me in, literally and otherwise." After she left, Elijah stood in the doorway, the sound of her heels fading down the hall. The apartment felt strangely quiet without her laughter. He glanced toward Maya's room, then at the empty soup container on the counter. He couldn't help but smile. Something had changed tonight, something small but powerful. The woman who had once treated him like a tool had stepped into his world, and in doing so shed a piece of her armor. And he, against all logic, had started to care about her. Not as a boss, not as a victim of her own grief, but as a person searching for the same thing. He was connection forgiveness home. After putting Maya to bed, Elijah returned to the small living room where the faint aroma of chamomile tea lingered in the air. Marina was still there, sitting quietly on the couch with her coat folded neatly beside her. The lamplight cast a soft glow on her face, highlighting the exhaustion beneath her calm exterior. It wasn't the weariness of a late night or too many deadlines. It was the kind that came from years of pretending not to feel. She glanced up at him, her hands wrapped around the warm mug he'd given her earlier. "She's sleeping?" she asked softly. "Out like a light," he replied, settling into the armchair across from her. "Your soup helped. It's my mother's recipe," she said, smiling faintly. She always said comfort begins with warmth. There was something about the way she said mother that carried both love and ache. Silence filled the room for a moment, not uncomfortable but dense like the quiet that follows after two people have stopped pretending they're strangers. Elijah studied her, noticing again how different she looked outside the office. There was no armor here, no sharp edges, no calculated composure. Just a woman trying to find her footing after years of standing too tall. Marina took a slow sip of her tea, then looked at him with an expression both curious and vulnerable. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Sure," Elijah answered. "Do you think people really change?" Her tone was cautious, almost pleading, as if the answer might determine the rest of her life. He leaned back, thinking before speaking. "Yeah," he said, "but not the way people think. Change isn't magic, it's choice." She frowned, slightly intrigued. Choice. We're shaped by pain, he said quietly, but we can choose who we become because of it. Some people let it harden them, others let it teach them. Marina stared into her tea for a long time, her fingers trembling slightly. I think I've been the first kind, she said. For so long I thought strength meant shutting people out. Every time someone disappointed me, I built another wall. Now I don't even know where the door is. Elijah smiled gently. Then maybe it's time to stop building and start opening. She looked at him, her eyes glistening. You make it sound so easy. It's not, he said, but it's worth trying. The quiet between them deepened. Outside rain began again, pattering lightly against the window pane. Marina glanced toward the sound, her voice barely above a whisper. You know what I remember most about my mother? She asked. Her laugh. It filled every room. Even when she was sick, she'd laugh so loudly the nurses complained. I used to hate it because I thought it made her look weak. After she died, I realized it was the only thing that kept her strong. She paused, swallowing hard. When she was gone, I decided I'd never be like her. I thought if I stayed in control, if I kept my emotions locked away, I'd never break like she did. But I was wrong. I broke anyway, just slower. Her confession hung in the air. Elijah wanted to reach out but stayed still, sensing she needed the silence. Finally, he said, maybe she'd be proud of you for realizing that now. Marina's lips curved into a small, fragile smile. You think so? I know so, he said. Because you're starting to laugh again. She laughed softly, then a sound filled with both sorrow and light. You really think I can change? She asked. I don't just think it, he said. I've already seen it. She looked down at her mug, her throat tightening. When you say things like that, it feels like you believe in me more than I do. Then maybe you can borrow some of my faith until yours comes back, he said. She looked up sharply, meeting his eyes, and for a moment the air between them felt charged, delicate, but electric. It wasn't attraction in the ordinary sense, it was something deeper, like two souls that had been walking parallel finally realizing they were meant to cross. They sat in silence again, the rain steady outside the clock, ticking softly. Marina set her mug down and said, You know, I've spent years surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear, but no one's ever told me what I needed to. Elijah raised an eyebrow. And what's that I'm not fine, she said. That it's okay not to be. That maybe I don't have to keep pretending I'm unshakable. No one's unshakable, Elijah said. Not really. We just get good at hiding the cracks. What about you? She asked, her gaze steady now. What are your cracks? He hesitated. Maya's mother, he said finally. She left when Maya was 2. Said I loved responsibility more than her. Maybe she was right. I just stopped expecting anyone to stay. His voice softened. But I learned something raising Maya. You can't protect yourself from pain without also protecting yourself from love. It's one and the same wall. Marina's eyes softened. So you took yours down? Piece by piece, he said. Still working on it. The room grew quieter. The rain slowed to a drizzle. Marina leaned back, her voice softer now. Maybe we both have some walls to take down. Elijah nodded. Maybe. She smiled faintly. You know, I used to think people like you didn't exist. People who do the right thing even when no one's watching. He chuckled. We exist. We just get tired sometimes. You don't seem tired, she said. You seem grounded. That's because I have a reason, he said. Her name's Maya. She looked toward the closed bedroom door and smiled gently. She's lucky. So am I, he said. She saved me more than I saved her. Marina looked back at him, her voice almost trembling. You're a good man, Elijah. He shook his head. Just trying to be one. You are, she said firmly. And that's rarer than people admit. For a moment, neither spoke. The connection between them stretched taut and real. Marina glanced away, her heart pounding in a rhythm she didn't want to name. She stood abruptly, gathering her coat. I should go, she said. It's late. Elijah rose too, walking her to the door. Thank you for coming, he said, for everything. No, she replied. Thank you for letting me see what real change looks like. She hesitated, her hand on the doorknob. Elijah, if you ever need anything at all, you call me. No titles, no work, just... She trailed off, unable to find the word. Just people he finished for her. She smiled, nodding. Yes, just people. The following weeks unfolded like a quiet miracle no one dared to speak about. The change in Marina Hale didn't happen overnight, but it was unmistakable. The woman who once walked through the office like a storm now moved with something close to calm. Her tone softened her temper, tempered itself into patience, and her eyes, once sharp with judgment, carried warmth that made people double-take. Rumors swirled, of course. Some thought she'd found religion. Others said she'd fallen in love. Elijah ignored the whispers and simply watched. He saw how she began thanking interns by name, how she started arriving earlier than everyone else, just to make sure the coffee machine worked, how she stood up for employees she'd once dismissed as weak. One afternoon, when a junior designer accidentally deleted a presentation minutes before a client meeting, the entire room braced for Marina's wrath. But instead, she smiled calmly and said, "Then we'll make it again, together." The relief that swept across the room was palpable, and for the first time, her team looked at her with admiration instead of fear. Elijah knew better than anyone that change like this didn't come easy. It was a daily act of will, a fight against old habits that whispered to return to comfort. But Marina didn't slip back. Not once. Their working relationship too began to evolve. She started asking for his input, not demanding it. Their conversation stretched beyond business into fragments of real life, his stories about Maya's school projects, her memories of her mother's garden, both cautious but genuine. One evening, after everyone had left, Marina stood in his doorway holding a manila folder. "I went through your notes on the new campaign," she said. "It's brilliant, but that's not what I wanted to talk about." She set the folder down and handed him a small notebook instead. "You mentioned you were writing a story for Maya," she said. "May I read it?" Elijah hesitated. That notebook was personal. His late-night thoughts turned into bedtime stories, pages filled with doodles and dreams. But something about her expression told him it was safe. "Sure," he said finally. She took it, promising to return it the next day. When he arrived at work the next morning, the notebook was waiting on his desk, but now it had a post-it note attached. "You have a gift. Don't hide it." Later that afternoon, she approached him again, this time holding her phone. "I made a few calls," she said casually. "An editor at Hartwell Press owes me a favor. They'd love to see your manuscript once it's finished." Elijah stared at her, speechless. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," she interrupted. "Maya deserves to see her father's words in print." The sincerity in her voice disarmed him. For a moment, he didn't see his boss standing there. He saw a friend, someone who genuinely cared. Outside of work, their lives began to intertwine naturally. Marina started visiting more often, always with some excuse. Sometimes she'd drop off books for Maya, sometimes leftover dinners she'd accidentally cooked too much of. She'd sit on their worn couch sipping tea, while Maya showed her drawings of castles and dragons, and Elijah pretended not to notice how easily Marina's laughter fit into the rhythm of their home. The once lonely woman who had hidden behind glass walls now spent evenings helping an 8-year-old build Lego towers and laughing when they fell. One Saturday, Marina invited them both to the city's art fair, a yearly event she used to sponsor, but never attended. "You'll love it," she said. "Maya can paint her own canvas, and I'll try not to embarrass myself in public." True to her word, she spent the afternoon in jeans and sneakers splattered with paint as she knelt beside Maya's easel. Elijah watched from a few feet away, smiling quietly. She looked free, lighter than he'd ever seen her. When Maya's small hand accidentally smudged paint onto Marina's cheek, Marina didn't scold her. She just laughed, a deep, unguarded laugh that made people nearby turn their heads. That sound became something Elijah carried with him long after the day ended. Back at work, her influence began to ripple outward. Clients noticed her renewed focus, and employees who once dreaded her meetings now looked forward to them. Productivity rose, but more than that, morale did. The agency felt alive again. When a reporter from a business magazine requested an interview about her leadership reinvention, she declined politely. It wasn't reinvention, she told Elijah afterward. It was remembering. He smiled. "Remembering what that people matter," she said simply. As weeks turned into months, Marina's visits became part of their routine. On Wednesday evenings, she'd show up with dinner or books. On Saturdays, she and Maya baked cookies while Elijah worked on his story. The three of them fit together with a strange kind of ease. Sometimes when Elijah caught Marina watching Maya with tenderness in her eyes, he wondered if his daughter reminded her of herself at that age, or maybe of the child she never had. Whatever it was, it healed something in both of them. One evening, while Marina helped Maya with her homework, Elijah sat at the kitchen table finalizing the last page of the storybook. It was a tale about a single father and his daughter who built a castle out of starlight to protect the people they loved. When he finished, he looked up to find Marina watching him, her expression proud. "You finished it," she said. "Yeah," he replied softly. "Couldn't have done it without a little encouragement." She smiled. "Then you better dedicate it properly." He chuckled. "To Maya, obviously. And maybe she teased gently to someone who threatened to buy the company if you didn't start writing again." He laughed. "I'll think about it." 2 weeks later, Hartwell Press accepted the manuscript for publication. When the letter arrived, Elijah didn't know who to tell first, so he called Marina. She answered on the first ring. "I knew they'd love it," she said. "You're a natural Elijah." Her voice was full of genuine joy, not professional satisfaction, but personal pride. That night she came over with a bottle of wine and a handmade card from Maya that said, "We did it." The three of them celebrated with laughter that spilled late into the night. As autumn rolled in, the bond between them deepened. They weren't quite a family, not yet, but they moved like one comfortable, steady, and unspokenly loyal. Elijah found himself looking forward to Marina's visits to her stories about her mother, to her gentle teasing, and the way she filled the once quiet spaces of his apartment with life. She no longer seemed like a figure from a different world, but someone who had quietly stepped into his and decided to stay. At work, people still whispered, but their whispers carried admiration now. Some said Marina had finally found peace. Others said she'd found love. Elijah didn't know what to call it yet, but he knew that something within both of them had shifted for good. The loneliness that had once defined their lives had begun to fade, replaced by a sense of belonging neither of them had dared to hope for. 1 year to the day, after the night, Elijah answered the call that changed everything. The city outside their window was wrapped in golden light. Inside the apartment, no longer just his, but theirs, the air smelled of lasagna and laughter. Maya stood on a stool in the kitchen sprinkling cheese far too generously, while Marina tried to steady the overflowing dish, laughing as she failed. "You're going to turn this into a dairy avalanche," she said, trying to sound stern. "Daddy likes extra cheese," Maya declared proudly. Elijah leaned against the doorway, watching them both with quiet awe. There was a time he never thought peace like this could exist, a time when his world had been small and lonely, defined by exhaustion and routine. But now there was color everywhere. Family photos lined the walls. Maya's drawings hung on the fridge beside a printed copy of Elijah's newly published book, The Castle of Stars. On the cover, Marina's name appeared in small print beneath his edited by Marina Hale. He smiled at that. It felt right. She had been editing his life since the night she asked for help outside that bar, rewriting pain into something better. When she finally noticed him standing there, she grinned. "Are you going to stand there admiring us, or help me rescue your dinner?" "I'm just enjoying the view," he said, stepping in to kiss the top of Maya's head. "Besides, looks like you two have it under control." "Under control is a strong word," Marina replied, her tone playful but warm. The sound of her laughter filled the room, and even now, months later, it still amazed him how natural it sounded in his home. It had once been the rarest thing in the world. Now it was as constant as breathing. After dinner, when Maya went to bed, clutching her stuffed bear and a brand new copy of her father's book, Elijah and Marina stepped out onto the small balcony. The city stretched before them, lights twinkling like stars fallen to earth. A cool breeze drifted through, carrying the faint hum of traffic below. Marina leaned against the railing beside him, silent for a moment, then said, "Hard to believe it's been a year." "Feels longer." he replied softly. In a good way? She smiled faintly. Do you ever think about that night every day, he said, but not the bad parts anymore. Just the fact that I almost didn't answer. You're lucky you did, she said. You would have missed out on a promotion, a published book, and my world-class lasagna? He chuckled. And you, I would have missed out on everything that matters, she said simply. They stood there quietly, watching, as a few late stars blinked into view. Elijah thought of how far she'd come, the woman who once used power to protect herself, now using love to rebuild her world. She reached into her pocket suddenly. I have something for you, she said, handing him a small, wrapped package. You didn't have to get me anything, he said. It's not an anniversary or anything. Maybe not on a calendar, she said. But it's the anniversary of the night you answered the call. I think that counts for something. He took the box, carefully removing the paper. Inside was a first edition of The Wind Through the Trees, the same children's book his father used to read to him. His throat tightened. Marina, he whispered. How did I have my ways? She said with a soft smile. Open it. He did. On the inside cover, her handwriting curved neatly across the page. To Elijah and Maya, some people save others without realizing they're saving themselves in the process. Thank you for teaching me how to live again. All my love, Marina. Below the inscription was a small velvet box. His heart skipped a beat. When he looked up, she was already taking it from the cover, her fingers trembling slightly. I've never done this before, she said, her voice shaking, so forgive me if I'm terrible at it. She took a deep breath. Elijah, you once told me everyone deserves a second chance. I didn't know then that mine would come in the form of you and Maya. You saved me from a life that looked perfect, but felt empty. You reminded me that strength isn't about walls. It's about who you let inside them. I don't want to just be part of your story. I want to spend the rest of my life writing it with you. She opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, gleaming faintly in the lamplight. For a long moment, Elijah couldn't speak. His mind flooded with memories the night at the bar. The trembling voice on the phone, the car ride filled with silence the moment she said she was sorry, the way she laughed for the first time at his kitchen table. All the pieces that had seemed so random now fit together perfectly, like a story that had always known its ending. He reached out, taking her hand in his. You know, he said, his voice low for someone who used to terrify entire rooms. You're not half bad at this. She laughed, eyes glistening. Is that a yes? It's more than yes, he said. It's always been yes. You just had to find your way home. She slipped the ring onto his finger, her hands shaking. When he leaned in to kiss her, it wasn't rushed or dramatic, it was slow, full of all the words they'd never needed to say. Behind them, the apartment glowed softly, filled with the warmth of something real, a second chance that had turned into a life. Inside, Maya stirred in her sleep, the book still open on her chest, her father's handwriting scrawled beneath the dedication. For the ones who teach us that kindness can rewrite the ending. Later that night, they sat together on the balcony, her head resting on his shoulder, the city still alive around them. You ever wonder, she said quietly, how different everything would be if I hadn't called you that night? Elijah smiled faintly. All the time. But then I remember something my father used to say. The most important moments in our lives don't announce themselves. They just happen, and we only realize how much they mattered after the fact. She nodded, closing her eyes. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, Elijah said. He'd have liked you too. She smiled softly. Even the dragon lady. Especially the dragon lady, he said, because she learned how to breathe warmth instead of fire. They sat in silence for a while, letting the night settle around them. The world outside didn't care about their story. It kept moving indifferent and vast, but for them time had paused. The journey from pain to peace, from resentment to forgiveness, from isolation to love had come full circle. As the clock struck midnight, Marina whispered, Do you think people get more than one second chance? Elijah looked at her, then at the city below its lights, flickering like stars trying to stay alive. I think, he said slowly, the good ones don't need more than one. They just make it count. She smiled, kissed him again, and rested her hand in his. Inside, the framed photo on the wall caught the light one taken just last month at the art fair. In it, Marina, Elijah, and Maya stood side by side, paint splattered, laughing like they'd never known pain. The caption scrawled at the bottom in Maya's messy handwriting read, "Our second chance." The night settled quiet and still, wrapping them in the kind of peace that only comes after long storms. And for the first time, both Elijah and Marina knew that the life they were living wasn't built from luck or coincidence. It was built from the courage to forgive, the grace to change, and the simple miracle of answering a call that shouldn't have been answered. Would the end. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about second chances and unexpected love. Tell us in the comments what moment hit you the hardest and where in the world you're watching from. We'd love to know how far this story has traveled.